With the rut coming on quickly, the chances of you seeing that target buck you're after on his feet during daylight hours is just going to keep going up. So you're looking at the calendar and the weather to figure out the absolute best days to take off work and spend some time in your favorite stands. So you're looking and you don't want to take off this day because the moon is going to be full and that means they'll be up all night feeding because they can see better, right? And then this day is going to be really windy, so we don't want to hunt that day. And then this day is going to be pretty hot, so deer aren't going to move much then, so we don't want to take off that day. And your prime hunting days are just starting to dwindle. And if you're a rifle hunter only, then that window is much smaller. But is all that stuff even true? Do deer move mostly at night during a full moon? Or is high wind really even that bad for hunting? Well, in this video, we're going to go over 3 buck movement myths so you can stop wasting those prime days based on some bad information. But before we get into these myths, do me a favor, and if this is your first time on my channel, hit that subscribe button and make sure you click that bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload a video. So let's just squash that big myth right off the bat. Does moon phase have any effect on deer movement? We've all heard this before. It's a full moon tonight, so deer are going to be up on their feet all night. We might as well just stay home and wait. And if you agree with this, you're not alone. A Penn State study confirmed that about 82% of hunters all believe that moon phase has at least some effect on deer movement. The 2-year study looked at meter per hour deer movement along with 3 different moon phases: full, partial, and new. And just as we'd expect, deer were moving more often between, right after sunrise and right before sunset. But based on the percentage of hunters who believe moon phase plays a role in deer movement, a lot of us would be surprised that there was no significant increase or decrease in deer movement based on moon phase. So the next time you find yourself studying a lunar calendar trying to find the very best days to be out there hunting, just put it away and look for other more important factors that actually do affect deer movement. And one of those other important factors brings us to deer movement myth number 2, and that is deer do not like to move when the wind is too high. I have always absolutely hated high wind days. If it's cold out, it just makes it all that much colder. If I'm fishing, it's blowing my lines all over the place, and keeping the boat where I want it just becomes an absolute chore. And if I'm hunting, those high wind days just make it almost impossible to hear what's going on around me. It's also hard for deer to hear predators when the wind is howling, right? If deer can't hear what's going on around them, they wouldn't want to move. And so as hunters, we just skip those days in favor of more calm days. And that would be a bad move. Another Penn State study looked at deer movement during 1,700 total hours during October. And what it found was that, yes, wind speed does play a big role in deer movement, but it is the opposite of what we would think. During days where the wind was above 10 miles per hour, deer were on their feet more during daylight hours. And if it was at night and that wind was high, they were actually staying bedded down. And it makes sense if you really think about it. I mean, deer have incredible vision. It's why we spend so much on those fancy camo patterns. But during periods of high wind, just because their hearing is impaired a little bit, that doesn't mean their vision is. So they'll just rely on their eyesight more. And during the night, they would want to stay bedded down because not only can they not see as well in the dark, they can still see very well in the dark, but not as well as they would during the daytime. But if that wind is howling, now they also can't hear very well. So hunt those high wind days. In fact, those high wind days actually may help you with your scent control. If you've got an area that you don't hunt very often because the wind can be pretty unpredictable, those high winds just may push that more into your favor. And the 3rd deer movement myth specifically affects the rut, and that is bucks will run for miles and miles trying to find receptive does. This is sort of half true in that some bucks do go on random excursions, and it's not entirely understood why. It could very well be hunting pressure, but it could also be just that this random individual buck got a wild hair and decided he wanted to go on a walkabout. For most bucks, especially older bucks, they tend to stay in their home range, which can be hundreds and hundreds of acres depending on your area. I think in Texas, I think the average was even 2,000 acres, so it's a very large area. But during the rut, those bucks tend to shrink down into more of their core areas, which is about 30% of their home ranges. And during this period, they're also visiting these same spots, these little hot spots, every 20 to 28 hours. It could be those scrapes, it could be bedding areas. It's these points that they focus on, and they're returning almost daily. And this is according to a 2012 GPS collar study. Where this can help you is if a buck has a large home range use, you can take advantage of his expanding core area use during the rut. And it's not a random pattern of movement. Instead of him moving across hundreds and hundreds of acres, his movement is focused on these core areas that could potentially hold receptive does and allow him to escape hunting pressure. And like that study found, bucks are identifying these hotspots and revisiting them every 20 to 28 hours. Like I said, your scrapes, your bedding areas. So if you can identify these, you can really focus in your hunting and you're not relying on some random buck movements. And that is why I feel that quality, secure cover is more important for the hunting season than those lush food plots. And that doesn't mean that food isn't important, and that doesn't mean that I do not like food plots, because I certainly love doing them. It just means that if a buck feels safe and the area can potentially hold receptive does, you are more likely to see that target buck on his feet during daylight hours. So that was 3 deer movement myths that you should be aware of to increase your chances of tagging that deer you're after. If you've got any more myths you'd like to share, leave those down in the comments below. Hit that like button if you liked this video, share it if you found it helpful, and make sure that you are subscribed so you can stay informed.